On the night of April 25th, 1986, Lyudmila Ignatenko went to bed early. Her husband Vasily had the night shift. She was 23 years old and pregnant with their first child. She kissed him goodbye at the door the way she always did. She did not know it was the last time she would kiss a healthy man. She would not understand what had happened until it was too late to run. And by then, running would not have saved either of them. A quiet night in Pripyat. Pripyat was not a city people feared. It was a city people envied. Built in 1970 to house the workers of the Vladimir Lenin nuclear power plant, it was one of the most modern cities in the Soviet Union. Wide boulevards, a new amusement park. Shops that actually had goods on the shelves, which in the Soviet Union of 1986 was not something you took for granted. The average age of its 50,000 residents was 26. Young families, engineers, scientists, people who had been told they were building the future. They believed it. Why wouldn't they? The reactor was safe. Everyone said so. The engineers who designed it said so. The scientists who ran it said so. The government that built it said so. And in a country where the distance between what the government said and what was actually true had been managed carefully for decades, most people had learned not to ask too many questions about the difference. That was the first lie of Chernobyl, not the explosion itself, the culture of silence that made the explosion inevitable. On the night of April the 25th, the operators at reactor number 4 were running a safety test. The test had been poorly designed. It had been postponed multiple times. It was being conducted by an exhausted night crew who had not been properly briefed. And it was being run on a reactor with a fundamental design flaw that the people in the room did not know about. Because the people who did know about it had decided that telling the operators might cause unnecessary concern. So the operators ran the test. And at 1:23 in the morning on April 26, 1986, reactor number 4 at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant exploded. Not the way a bomb explodes, not a single moment of destruction. 2 explosions, seconds apart. The first blew the 1,000-ton lid off the reactor. The second sent a plume of radioactive material into the night sky that would eventually reach every country in the Northern Hemisphere. In the control room, the operators looked at their instruments. The instruments told them the reactor was fine. The instruments were wrong. Or rather, the instruments had not been designed to measure what had just happened, because what had just happened was something the designers had said could not happen. Outside, the night sky above Reactor 4 glowed blue. Some of the workers who came outside to look said it was beautiful. They did not know that what they were seeing was Chernobyl radiation. They did not know that they were standing in the open air of one of the most radioactive environments in human history. They did not know because no one had told them. And that silence, that specific, systemic, institutional silence, would cost more lives than the explosion itself. The first responders. The call went out as a routine fire. That is what the dispatcher said. A fire at the nuclear power plant. Vasily Ignatenko was 25 years old. He had been a firefighter for 3 years. He was good at his job, the kind of person who ran toward things that other people ran away from, not because he was reckless, but because he believed in what he was doing. When the call came in, he did not hesitate. He and his unit drove toward the glow on the horizon. They arrived to find the reactor building partially destroyed, the roof of the turbine hall on fire, and chunks of strange dark material scattered across the ground. Some of the firefighters picked up the material with their bare hands. It felt warm. One of them later said it felt like sand, but heavier. What they were holding was graphite from the reactor core. Each piece they touched delivered a radiation dose that would have been considered dangerous, even in a controlled medical setting with protective equipment. They had no protective equipment. They had been told it was a fire. Vasily climbed onto the roof of the reactor building. The heat from below was intense. His skin began to feel like sunburn within minutes. He thought it was the heat from the fire. It was not the heat from the fire. By the time the firefighters were relieved and taken to the medical station, some of them were already vomiting. The doctor on duty that night noted their symptoms. She had treated radiation sickness before, in small doses, in controlled settings. She recognized what she was seeing. She made phone calls. She was told to keep the information quiet, not to cause panic, not to alarm the workers at the plant who were still on shift, not to say the word radiation to the patients themselves. This was the second lie of Chernobyl. The first lie was the design flaw no one was allowed to know about. The second lie was the diagnosis no one was allowed to hear. Vasily Ignatenko and his fellow firefighters were loaded onto buses and driven to Hospital Number 6 in Moscow, the Soviet Union's specialized facility for radiation treatment. They were told they were being treated for chemical burns. Some of them believed it. Some of them did not. But in a system where questioning the official explanation carried its own risks, belief and doubt had long since learned to occupy the same space in a person's mind without disturbing each other. Lyudmila Ignatenko received a phone call the next morning. Her husband was in Moscow. He had been injured. She should come. She took the first train. She did not know what she was traveling toward. The city that did not know. In Pripyat, on the morning of April 26th, life continued. Children went to school. Couples walked in the park. The amusement park, which was scheduled to open for the May Day celebrations in 5 days, sat waiting, its Ferris wheel still and silent against a sky that looked normal. The sky was not normal. The wind was carrying radioactive particles across the city. They were invisible. They had no smell. They landed on the children playing outside with the same indifference that ordinary dust lands on anything. The Soviet government knew what had happened by mid-morning. The decision was made not to evacuate. Not yet. An evacuation would cause panic. An evacuation would require explaining why. An explanation would require admitting that the reactor, which was supposed to be the pride of Soviet engineering, had just experienced the kind of catastrophic failure that Soviet officials had repeatedly and publicly stated was impossible. So the city was not told. Not on the morning of April 26th. Not through the afternoon. Not through the evening, while families ate dinner and watched state television, which reported nothing unusual. Children played outside on April 26th for a full day, while the invisible remnants of a reactor core drifted through their neighborhoods. The evacuation of Pripyat was finally ordered on the afternoon of April 27th, 36 hours after the explosion. The residents were told to take only what they needed for 2 or 3 days. They were told they would be back soon. Many of them left food on their tables, photographs on their walls, children's toys on the floor, pet cats locked inside apartments. They locked their doors carefully, the way you do when you expect to return. Most of them never did. The city of Pripyat has been empty for nearly 40 years. The food is still on some of those tables. The photographs are still on the walls. The toys are still on the floors. and the pet cats, the ones that were not evacuated. Their descendants still roam the empty streets, watched by scientists who study what happens to animals when humans disappear and radiation remains. This is the third lie of Chernobyl. Not a spoken lie, a lie of timing. The lie that said, "We will tell you, but not yet, not yet, not yet," until not yet became too late. What the body does not know. In Moscow, Lyudmila Ignatenko was not allowed into her husband's room at first. She argued with the nurses. She argued with the doctors. She said she was his wife. They said she could not go in. She went in anyway. What she saw was not the man she had kissed goodbye 2 nights earlier. His face was swollen. His skin had changed color. He was in pain that the medication was not fully reaching. But he was awake, and when he saw her, he smiled. She stayed. The doctors told her she should not touch him. She touched him anyway. They told her she should not sleep in his room. She slept in his room anyway. She was 23 years old and pregnant, and she had decided that whatever was happening to her husband, she would not let him face it alone. That decision would cost her the child she was carrying. The radiation Vasily's body was emitting, because he had absorbed so much that he had become, in a sense, a source himself, was enough to cause damage to the fetus she did not yet know how to protect. The baby was born with cirrhosis of the liver, congenital heart disease, and lived for 4 hours. Lyudmila named her Natasha. She has never stopped talking about her. Vasily Ignatenko died on May 13, 1986, 14 days after the explosion. He was 25 years old. He died not knowing the full truth of what had killed him. Because even in the hospital, in the final days, the language of the official explanation was still being managed, still being controlled, still being shaped by a system that had decided at some level that perhaps it could not even fully articulate that the truth was more dangerous than the thing that had caused all of this. This is the horror that sits at the center of Chernobyl, not the explosion, not the radiation, but the gap between what was happening to these human bodies and what the system permitted those bodies to be told. A gap so wide that a man could die inside it. The Liquidators. In the weeks and months after the explosion, the Soviet government mobilized what would become one of the largest disaster response operations in human history. They called them the Liquidators. Approximately 600,000 people, soldiers, miners, engineers, firefighters, scientists, civilians drafted into service. They came from across the Soviet Union. They were sent into the exclusion zone to do the work that needed to be done, to contain the reactor, to clean the contaminated areas, to bury the most dangerous material, to build the sarcophagus, the enormous concrete structure designed to contain what remained of reactor number 4. Many of them were not told the full extent of the danger. Some were given dosimeters, devices that measured radiation exposure. Some of those dosimeters were calibrated to record lower readings than the actual exposure, because there were limits on how much radiation a worker was officially permitted to receive. And once a worker reached that limit, they had to be sent home, and there was still too much work to do. So the dosimeters lied. In a disaster caused by a culture of institutional dishonesty, the instruments of measurement were themselves made dishonest. The workers did their jobs. Many of them did their jobs with extraordinary courage, knowing or half-knowing what they were walking into. The miners who dug the tunnel beneath the reactor to prevent it from sinking into the groundwater worked in conditions of extreme heat and radiation, stripped to the waist because the heat was so intense, doing work that their bodies absorbed at a rate that would shorten the lives of many of them by decades. One miner later said that they knew what they were doing would probably kill them. He said they did it anyway because someone had to. Because if the reactor sank into the groundwater, the contamination would spread to the water supply of millions of people. Because the math of sacrifice, when it is presented to people with enough clarity and enough context, sometimes produces a kind of courage that is hard to explain from the outside. But it should never be confused with the decision that created the need for that courage. The courage of the liquidators was real. The system that sent them in without full information was also real. Both things are true. And the distance between those two truths is where the moral weight of Chernobyl lives. The silence after the fire. The Soviet government's initial response to the international community was denial. For days after the explosion, Soviet state media reported nothing. It was Sweden, not the Soviet Union, that first alerted the world to what had happened, when workers at a Swedish nuclear plant began setting off radiation alarms. The radiation was coming from their clothes. The radiation was coming from the Soviet Union. When the Swedish government asked for an explanation, the Soviet Union admitted that an accident had occurred. The word accident was doing a great deal of work in that sentence. Mikhail Gorbachev, who had been General Secretary of the Soviet Union for only a year when Chernobyl happened, would later say that the explosion was a turning point, not just for the Soviet nuclear program, but for the Soviet Union itself. That Chernobyl revealed something about the system that the system could not survive seeing clearly. A country built on the management of information had encountered an event that information could not manage. The radiation did not read the official reports. The radiation did not stop at the borders of the exclusion zone because the exclusion zone had been officially declared. The radiation moved through the air and the water and the food chain with the complete indifference of physics to politics. And in that indifference, something cracked. Not just the reactor, not just the concrete, but the idea that a government could control reality through the management of what its people were permitted to know. Chernobyl did not cause the collapse of the Soviet Union, but it demonstrated, in terms that could not be argued with, the cost of a system in which truth was a resource to be rationed rather than a foundation to be built on. The sarcophagus built over reactor number 4 in 1986 was itself not built to last. It was built quickly under impossible conditions by people working in radiation levels that limited how long any individual could be exposed. By the 1990s, it was already deteriorating. In 2016, a new containment structure, the new safe confinement, was completed and moved into place over the old sarcophagus. It is the largest movable land-based structure ever built. It is designed to last 100 years. After that, someone else will have to figure out what comes next, because the reactor will remain dangerous for approximately 20,000 years. The immediate crisis lasted days. The human crisis lasted decades. The physical crisis will outlast every government, every ideology, and every person alive today by a margin that the human mind is not built to fully comprehend. The city, the forest, is taking back. Today, the forests around Chernobyl are returning. Trees grow through the floors of abandoned buildings in Pripyat. Moss covers the streets. The amusement park Ferris wheel still stands, slowly rusting, its gondolas swaying in the wind. Wildlife has returned in ways that surprised the scientists who study the exclusion zone. Wolves, bears, wild horses, lynx, birds in numbers not seen in the region for generations. Nature, it turns out, prefers the absence of humans to the presence of radiation. That is a fact worth sitting with. Tourists come now. They walk through the abandoned city with Geiger counters and cameras. They photograph the school with the gas masks on the floor, the hospital with the firefighters' uniforms still in the basement, so radioactive after 40 years that visitors are warned not to touch them. The control room of reactor number 4, which can now be visited with a guide, where the instruments that gave false readings on the night of April the 26th, 1986, still sit at their stations, as if waiting for a shift that will never come. People come to Chernobyl to understand something. They are not entirely sure what. Perhaps they come because the exclusion zone is one of the few places on Earth where the consequences of human decisions have been preserved in physical form, where the gap between what was said and what was true has been made visible in crumbling concrete and empty streets and a Ferris wheel that never opened. Perhaps they come because the question Chernobyl asks is one that every society in every era has had to answer. What happens when the systems we build to protect us are built on foundations we are not permitted to examine? What happens when the gap between the official version and the true version becomes so wide that the official version can no longer hold? What happens when the thing we were told could not happen happens? Chernobyl did not answer those questions for the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union collapsed 5 years after the explosion for reasons that were complex and multiple and cannot be reduced to a single cause. But Chernobyl had shown something that could not be unseen: that a system which cannot tell the truth about its failures cannot protect the people who live inside it. That the most dangerous thing in the world is not a reactor without a containment structure. It is a culture without one. Vasily Ignatenko's name is on a memorial in Kiev. His wife Lyudmila is still alive. She has spent decades telling the story of what happened in that hospital room in Moscow in May of 1986. She tells it not to assign blame, not to relitigate the politics of a country that no longer exists. She tells it because she believes that what happened to her husband deserves to be known. That a man who ran toward a fire in the middle of the night because someone called and said they needed him deserves more than a number in a casualty report. That the truth about what killed him is the only thing left she can give him. The reactor is still there, under its new containment structure, under the weight of 40 years of consequences, under the forest that is slowly reclaiming everything around it, still burning, very slowly, in a way that no political decision can stop and no official report can manage. Just burning, the way truth burns when it has been contained too long. It does not ask permission. It does not wait for the right moment. It simply continues until the structure built to hold it can no longer hold. And then the world finds out what was inside.